Today we're going to be doing a vehicle inspection on a Ram 3500 tool truck. We're going to be looking for safety, informalities, and other things to look for. So when I first am going to do an inspection, I'm going to walk up to the front of it. I'm going to look for the truck leaning to one side or the other. I'm going to look underneath to make sure there's no leaks, as well as make sure that my tires don't look like they're flat or anything that might be obstructing. I want to look at my bumper as well as my front end, make sure my headlamps are not fogged over, have condensation in them, which could cause a bulb to burn out or anything that might fall off. I'm going to also make sure my license plate is attached, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up the hood and look at my fluids and other components inside the engine compartment. So first I'm going to check my fluids. This is my engine oil dipstick. I am going to make sure it has the proper level. It's always better to have a rag to wipe it off and then reinsert it and then check it again. I'm going to check my brake fluid. These are hydraulic brakes and it takes only .3 fluid. I'm going to make sure it's not above the max or the minimum and that the fluid doesn't look contaminated. I am going to make sure I have windshield wiper fluid, that it's full. I'm going to check my battery connections. I'm going to make sure that they're not corroded or anything out of the ordinary. As I'm on this side, I'm going to go ahead and check lines, transmission cooler lines, power steering lines, as well as my power steering fluid. This one seems to be at the proper level, as well as looking at my fan, the serpentine belt, and anything else. Make sure there's no fuel leaks or oil leaks or anything of the nature. I'm going to come over to the passenger side. I'm going to look at my engine coolant, make sure it's at the proper level and not too low. And I never want to open the radiator cap, which could send hot fluid or anything and a lot of pressure at your face to burn you. I'm going to look at this battery, make sure the cables are good. I'm going to look at my air box and make sure that there's nothing loose. I'm going to look for the wiring, make sure nothing's chafed in the exhaust system, that I don't see no black soot anywhere. I'm also going to look at this side at the water pump and the alternator, make sure there's no corrosion, any white marks or black marks causing a loose wire. Make sure there's no shiny spots anywhere, as well as coolant lines. Make sure that there's nothing leaking and everything seems to be intact. So now I'll turn on the lights before doing my 360 walk around. Now I turn on my lights. I'm going to do my 360 walk around and start looking at the truck from the passenger side around back to the driver's side. So first I'm going to look at my tires, make sure they're not under 4/32 of tread on the steer tires, that my lug nuts are attached. I can look through this wheel and be able to see my brakes and my calipers. The brakes look good. My calipers don't look like they're leaking. My rotors don't look like they have any grooves or anything to indicate a malfunction. I want to look at my suspension, this coilover spring, as well as the shock. I'm looking for fluid, shiny spots, or broken pieces. I'm going to look at my tie rod ends, the torsion bars, and any of the steering components in the front. Also need to look for leaks that might be coming out of a wheel seal or an axle seal from that front axle. As I go around, I want to make sure my mirrors are securely attached, that the lights are on and the lenses are clear and not faded. I want to make sure I have my company logo and my DOT number. This truck does not need to have a VIN number, so I'm not going to worry about it. I also need to make sure my mirrors are clean, as well as not cracked or missing. Anything attached, I want to make sure that a step bar is not going to fall off or anything. I might as well check, make sure my doors open and close. On the interstate, a state patrol might come from your passenger side, and this will need to be operational. That door works. I'm going to check my toolboxes, make sure they're securely attached, that they're not going to come open, that I see no cracked welds on the bed or anything. I'm also going to get down and look at my exhaust system. There cannot be any exhaust leaks underneath the cab or anywhere else on the system without getting a violation. I'm going to look at my frame, my drive shaft and U-joints, and make sure they're all attached. I'm going to look at my rear tires and make sure they're not below 2 seconds of tread. I'm going to look for irregular wear, any obstructions between the duals. I'm going to look at the suspension, the springs, make sure they haven't scissored, moved to side, they're cracked or missing the spring hangers, make sure they're securely attached. I'm also going to look at the rear shocks, make sure they're not leaking, as well as the axle seal. I see nothing here. I'm going to look at my lug nuts, make sure they're attached, make sure my rims aren't bent or cracked or anything done to them differently from the factory. I'm going to make sure there's nothing rubbing or that could cause electrical failure. And I'm going to make sure this marker light is on and reflective, and I want them clean. If they're not clean, that will pose a problem and you can get a ticket for it. I want to come to the back, give an overall appearance of it, check my license plate and make sure that it's not expired, or if it's soon to be, that I notify someone to get me a new sticker. I'm going to check my mud flaps, make sure they're not touching the ground or cut or ripped or missing. My lights seem to be working. I'm going to make sure that my fire extinguisher is securely mounted, that it has a monthly punch tag, and that it has also a yearly tag of inspection. I want to make sure if I have a tailgate that it's not going to come loose. Check for any broken welds, anything if I'm going to haul a trailer. Look at the hitch and whatnot. Safety rings for your chains. I'm also going to check, make sure I have this tab for my lights for my trailer. Then I'm going to come around, look down the side of my truck, make sure toolboxes on this side are securely attached. My marker light's on and it's clean. I'm going to look at this side and also look towards the opposite side of the wheel. Make sure I see nothing out of the ordinary. Look at my suspension, the U-bolts, the spring hangers. Make sure the springs are intact, nothing missing off of them. Check these lug nuts. Check, make sure my tires got even wear, that they're not below the 230 seconds. The rim, nothing there. In between the duals, it's nice to feel and look to make sure there's everything there. Then I'm going to move forward. Look at this toolbox. Make sure that my fuel cap is securely attached. I'm going to look at my fuel tank. Make sure it's securely attached, that it's not sagging or leaking. Look at my frame members. Look at my rear axle all the way up to my front axle and make sure there's nothing dripping. I'm going to check this step bar and make sure it's not rusted or about to fall off. I'm going to look at this mirror, make sure the glass is there. My windows, my doors, that they're properly shut and open. I'm going to look for my company logo, DOT number, my annual, which is done in March of 2018, as well as anything else. I'm going to make sure I look at this wheel side and this suspension. I'm going to look at the shocks, the steering, as well as anything else with the suspension components and brakes. My lug nuts, the calipers, make sure the brake pads have enough thickness that my rotors aren't gouged. Look at the tire sidewalls, make sure that they're not cut or anything. If I see any damage, note the damage and report it, and just make sure that this windshield and the wipers are intact. And with that, I'm going to go inside and do my in-cab inspection. After I've done my walk around, my 360 walk around, I'm going to do my in-cab inspection. I want to make sure first I have my safety equipment, which is lights and fuses, my cab triangles, that all three of them are there, and as well I checked my fire extinguisher already, and now I'm going to go ahead and test my horn. I'm going to make sure my windshield doesn't look cracked. My rear view mirror is adjusted and fastened. I'm going to make sure that my mirrors are adjusted to me. I am going to make sure that when the truck starts, it starts smoothly and does not cause any other issues. So as I start it, I'm looking at my fuel gauge, I'm looking at my temp gauge, as well as my oil pressure gauge. Those are all where they're supposed to be. My voltmeter gauge is working. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my lights work. If I need to get out and check something again, I'm going to do that. I'm also going to make sure the defrost works. Turn it on, make sure it's actually coming out of the vents, and it is. I'm going to make sure I have cleanliness, that my radio works to listen for emergency messages. I'm going to make sure I have the right amount of free play in the steering wheel. I'm going to go ahead and test my parking brake. So what you want to do is put it all the way to the floor, put it in drive, let go of the brake pedal, and make sure you do not roll. If you roll or move, that is a violation. I'm also going to test my wipers, make sure they work, that my washer fluid actually comes out, and I'm going to make sure that everything else looks good. Up here I have my registration, my insurance card, and in here I have my annual inspection, DOT inspection. So once I've done all that, I want to make sure my seat belt is here, that it will go ahead and buckle up. Make sure that's good. And then from there, I am going to go ahead and be on my way and be done with my vehicle inside cab inspection report. This concludes our vehicle inspection for a Ram 3500.